just what are your plans for the off season and possibly playing or just doing individual workouts?
Yeah, I mean, probably take a little bit of a break here, just for maybe a week. I don't really want to lose a ton of the stuff I've worked on. And
everyone thought they were watching a simple rookie debut, a feel-good story about a girl from Iowa making it to the big leagues. But they were dead wrong. What we're actually witnessing is a hostile corporate takeover disguised as a basketball season. While the mainstream media was busy talking about three-pointers and assist records, a massive power shift was happening behind closed doors. One that has left the WNBA commissioner scrambling to save her career and the old guard of the league shaking in their sneakers. Caitlin Clark didn't just sign a contract to play point guard. She walked into the league with enough leverage to bring the entire establishment to its knees. Now the fallout is hitting the fan, and heads are starting to roll. It all started with the ink on the paper. Specifically, the deal that changed the economy of women's sports overnight. When Clark signed that historic 8-year, $28 million contract with Nike, it wasn't just a sneaker deal. It was an insurance policy against the league itself. For decades, the WNBA held all the cards. They dictated where players went, how they traveled, and how much they could earn. But this Nike deal flipped the script immediately. To put it in perspective, Clark is set to make more from Nike in a single year than most WNBA players will make in a lifetime. This financial reality made the rookie bigger than the brand she plays for. Nike isn't just paying for a signature shoe here. They're paying for the face of the future. This massive investment meant that any threat to Clark, whether it was a hard foul on the court or a PR disaster from the league office, became a direct threat to Nike's bottom line. But before the ink was even dry, the sharks were circling. You have to understand that Nike didn't just hand this money over. They had to win a war to get her. Reports surfaced that Adidas, Puma, and Under Armour were throwing everything they had at Clark's team during the pitch meetings. Stephen Curry was reportedly involved in the Under Armour pitch, and the numbers being thrown around were astronomical. Nike knew they couldn't lose her. They saw the data. They saw the jersey sales. They knew that securing Clark was more important than securing some entire NBA teams. By winning that bidding war, Nike effectively became Clark's primary employer. The Indiana Fever and the WNBA became secondary. This created a tension that the league was completely unprepared to handle. What happens when the employee has more power than the boss? Naturally, you can't walk into a competitive environment with that kind of backing without putting a massive target on your back. The jealousy narrative that the media tries to downplay wasn't just a rumor. It was broadcast live in 4K for the world to see. It started before the season even tipped off. Legends of the game, players who had built the league from the ground up, started taking subtle and not-so-subtle shots at the newcomer. We saw Cheryl Swoops, a literal icon, questioning Clark's records and suggesting her success was only due to favorable circumstances. Whether it was intended as analysis or resentment, it set the tone. The message from the old guard was clear. You haven't earned it yet. But the problem was the fans didn't care about earning it. They came to see Clark. And that reality seemed to drive the resentment even deeper. Once the game started, the tension moved from podcasts to the hardwood. We saw the hard fouls, the cheap shots, and the welcome to the pros moments that looked a lot more like a physical crackdown than honest defense. The Chindy Carter incident was the spark that really lit the fire. When Carter hip-checked Clark to the floor away from the ball and then was seen cheering about it, it sent a shockwave through the fan base. It wasn't a basketball play. It was a message. And it wasn't just Carter. We saw Angel Reese and others involved in physical altercations that seemed personal. Veterans who had been grinding for years for a fraction of the pay were suddenly watching a 22-year-old arrive with a private security detail and the keys to the kingdom. The physical targeting escalated, and the aggression on the court started to look less like competition and more like a coordinated effort to break the rookie's spirit. This is where the failure of leadership began to show its cracks. While the rookie was getting hammered on the court, the one person hired to protect the integrity of the game went missing in action. Commissioner Kathy Engelbert stayed shockingly silent. In any other league, look at the NBA, the NFL, or the MLB, if the golden goose is getting headhunted, the front office steps in immediately. If someone targeted LeBron James or Patrick Mahomes with non-basketball violence, there would be suspensions, fines, and press conferences within the hour. But here? Crickets. The silence fueled speculation that the league was actually okay with the rough treatment. Some insiders whispered that the league office thought the drama was good for ratings. A classic case of prioritizing short-term buzz over long-term stability. The failure to act created a vacuum, and the media rushed in to fill it. Suddenly, the narrative wasn't about basketball anymore. It was about race, privilege, and bullying. Shows like The View, First Take, and The Pat McAfee Show were debating the ethics of the WNBA every single day. The league was getting more coverage than ever, but it was for all the wrong reasons. They were being painted as a league of bullies who couldn't handle a new star. And through it all, Engelbert refused to take control of the narrative. By letting the hazing continue unchecked, she allowed the brand of the WNBA to become toxic to the millions of new fans tuning in for the first time. These new viewers weren't seeing tough defense. They were seeing a gang up, and they were turning off the TV in disgust, but the controversy didn't stop at hard fouls. The Olympic snub was another massive blow to the league's credibility in the eyes of the general public. When the roster for Team USA was announced and Clark was left off, the decision was defended as a basketball decision based on experience. But to the Nike executives and the casual fans, it looked like gatekeeping at its finest. Here you had the most popular female athlete on the planet, healthy and ready to go, and the establishment said no thanks. It reinforced the idea that the WNBA ecosystem was insular, cliquish, and resistant to the change Clark represented. It was a marketing disaster. Millions of dollars in potential promotion were left on the table, and once again, the commissioner's office seemed powerless or unwilling to intervene in the politics of USA basketball to save the moment. Then the dam finally broke. The tension had been building for months. The fouls, the media arguments, the silence. Until Commissioner Engelbert went on national television and gave an interview that might go down as the biggest PR disaster in WNBA history. She appeared on CNBC, a business network, likely expecting a softball interview about the league's growing revenue. Instead, she was pressed on the dark side of this growth. The toxic, racist, and misogynistic rhetoric being thrown around by warring fan bases on social media. This was her moment to be a leader. This was her moment to say we do not tolerate hate. She failed spectacularly. Instead of condemning the toxicity, she tried to pivot to a business answer. She compared the situation to the rivalry between Magic Johnson and Larry Bird in the 80s, suggesting that rivalry is good for business because it drives viewership. It was a massive tone-deaf misread of the room. By comparing modern-day cyberbullying and racially charged harassment to a sporting rivalry, she effectively told the players that the hate speech they were receiving was just part of the marketing gold. She monetized their pain on live TV. The clip went viral instantly, and the reaction was catastrophic. The backlash was instant and lethal. But it didn't just come from Twitter trolls. It came from inside the house. The players' union, the WNBPA, didn't just disagree with her. They went for the jugular. Terry Jackson, the executive director of the union, released a statement that essentially torched Engelbert's leadership. The statement accused the commissioner of failing to protect the players' dignity and safety. It was scathing. They explicitly stated that hate speech is not a marketing strategy. This wasn't just a disagreement. It was a vote of no confidence. In the corporate world, when your workforce publicly shames you and accuses you of moral failure, it's usually the beginning of the end. This is the moment the commissioner effectively got canceled by her own league. Players like Breanna Stewart, usually reserved, spoke out. The locker rooms turned against the front office. The players made it clear they weren't going to let leadership profit off the toxicity while they took the heat and the harassment. Engelbert tried to issue a clarification, a cleanup statement later that day, but the damage was already done. The trust was broken. You can't walk back a comment that reveals you see player harassment as a metric for success, but there's a bigger, darker shadow looming over this entire administrative collapse. Nike. You have to remember the money we talked about at the start. Nike didn't drop $28 million to watch their investment get beaten up on the court or dragged into toxic culture wars by incompetent leadership. Rumors are now swirling that the pressure to fix this mess isn't just coming from the players, but from the sponsors who keep the lights on. Nike needs Caitlin Clark to be a pristine, heroic figure to sell shoes. They need the WNBA to be a professional, safe platform for her stardom. If the league looks like a chaotic, petty, dangerous place, it hurts the brand. Think about the leverage Nike has. They've been the engine behind the NBA's global dominance for 30 years. They know how to manufacture stars and protect assets. Do you really think they're going to sit back and let a commissioner jeopardize their $250 million projection for the Caitlin Clark business line? Absolutely not. There are whispers that high-level conversations are happening, effectively giving the WNBA an ultimatum. Clean up the game, stop the cheap shots, and get the PR under control, or the support starts to waver. In a way, the decisions are effectively being made from Nike headquarters, not the league office. Clark's brand is now strong enough to force the league to clean house. And it's not just Nike. The Caitlin Clark effect has brought in a new media rights deal worth a reported $2.2 billion over 11 years. That's life-changing money for the league and the players. But everyone knows, even the players who resent her, that this number wouldn't exist without the viewership numbers Clark pulled in. We're talking about games that used to get 300,000 viewers now getting 2 million. We're talking about moving games from 4,000-seat arenas to 18,000-seat NBA stadiums to accommodate the crowds. The economic reality is that Clark is the engine. The commissioner's job was to manage this transition smoothly, and she fumbled it. When you fumble a $2.2 billion bag, you don't usually get to keep your job, but we also have to look at the unrivaled threat. This is a new 3-on-3 league being founded by WNBA stars Breanna Stewart and Nafisa Collier, set to run in the off-season. They're offering massive salaries and equity to players. Why does this matter? Because it gives the players leverage. If the WNBA remains toxic and mismanaged, the top talent now has another place to go, another way to make money. And guess who they're aggressively recruiting? Caitlin Clark. If Clark decides to prioritize a different venture or if she takes her star power elsewhere, the WNBA loses its golden ticket. The commissioner knows this, and it's adding to the panic behind the scenes. Let's go back to the locker room dynamics, because this is where the takeover feels most personal. The old guard of the WNBA, the Dianas, the Cheryls, are seeing their influence wane in real time. For 20 years, they controlled the culture. It was a gritty, underground, us-against-the-world culture. Now it's a mainstream, corporate, high-visibility culture, and they aren't the ones on the billboards. This friction is natural, but the commissioner's job was to bridge that gap. She needed to celebrate the legends while ushering in the new era. Instead, she let the two sides go to war, pitting the veterans against the rookies in a way that made everyone look bad. The behind-the-scenes incident involving the charter flights is another perfect example of Clark forcing the league's hand. For years, WNBA players complained about flying commercial, squeezing into coach seats, and dealing with delays. The league said it was too expensive to fix. Then Clark arrives. Suddenly, the security concerns of having Caitlin Clark standing in a TSA line became a nightmare. Nike and Clark's team pushed for better security. Almost overnight, the league found the money for a charter flight program. The veterans were happy to have the flights, but they were resentful that it took a rookie to get it done. It proved that the league always had the capacity to treat them better. They just didn't care until their new cash cow was at risk. It was another strike against the leadership's credibility. So where do we stand now? The commissioner is technically still in charge, but she's a leader in name only. She's lost the confidence of the players who feel she sold them out for engagement numbers. She's lost the confidence of the fans who view her as incompetent and slow to react. And most dangerously, she's on thin ice with the corporate partners who are actually funding the operation. The WNBPA's demand for new leadership is growing louder. They want a commissioner who understands the modern media landscape, one who will protect players from abuse rather than profiting from it. The fallout from the CNBC interview is still settling, but the writing is on the wall. You cannot survive a public revolt from your own union in professional sports. Adam Silver, the NBA commissioner, works for the owners but with the players. Engelbert seems to be working for no one but the algorithm. The speculation is that the league owners are quietly looking for a successor, someone who can handle the Nike era of the WNBA. They need a wartime general, not a corporate bureaucrat. Caitlin Clark, for her part, has kept her head down. She hasn't publicly called for anyone's firing. She hasn't engaged in the Twitter wars. She just plays. And that silence is perhaps the biggest power move of all. She knows she doesn't have to say anything. Her value speaks for itself. Her agents, her sponsors, and the TV networks are doing the talking for her. She's the sun that the rest of the league revolves around now. And if the commissioner can't handle the heat, she's going to get burned. As we look toward the next season, the landscape of the WNBA is unrecognizable compared to 2 years ago. We're looking at expansion teams coming to Golden State, Portland, and Toronto, all paid for by the hype Clark generated. We're looking at players' salaries finally starting to creep up. We're looking at a league that is finally profitable. But the cost of this rapid expansion was the exposure of deep structural rot in the leadership. The Caitlin Clark takeover wasn't just about basketball stats. It was about exposing an amateur administration trying to run a major league business. The commissioner's cancellation serves as a warning to whoever comes next. The game has changed. You aren't just managing a basketball league anymore. You're managing a global entertainment product with billion-dollar stakes. The days of flying under the radar are over. The days of ignoring player safety are over. And the days of treating the WNBA like a charity case are dead and buried. Caitlin Clark killed the old WNBA. And now everyone, including the commissioner, is fighting to survive in the new one. Ultimately, this story is about power. Who has it? Who wants it? And what happens when it shifts too fast? The veterans had the power of tenure. The commissioner had the power of the office. But Caitlin Clark brought the power of the people and the power of Nike. In a capitalist system, the money always wins. The jealousy was just the growing pains of a league realizing it was no longer in control of its own destiny. The hard fouls were just the last gasps of a culture that was being phased out. And the commissioner's downfall was simply the collateral damage of a supernova exploding in a small room. So is Kathy Engelbert done? It's hard to see a path back. When you alienate the talent, the union, the fans, and the sponsors, you're a leader without a constituency. The WNBA is heading into its most important era ever, and they can't afford a captain who's asleep at the wheel. The Nike executives are watching. The TV networks are watching. And Caitlin Clark is waiting. The takeover is complete. Now we just have to wait and see who's left standing when the dust finally settles. One thing is for certain. The WNBA will never be the same. And it has nothing to do with a three-point shot.